अस्सलाम वालेकुम everybody. मेरा नाम समर हसन है और मैं founder हूँ Epiphany की. As you guys know, I'm the founder of Epiphany and my name is Samar. And this time around, we are back with Epiphany Talks number 18. Can you believe it? It's number 18th talk for us already. Not to mention all the other sessions that we've been doing, impacting lives and smashing it and whatnot. And this is going to be our final one for July. So I hope you guys are signing in. If you guys don't have time today because it's nearly Eid, और आप लोग मसरूफ़ हैं, कोई बात नहीं, आप लोग हमेशा हमारे यूट्यूब के चैनल पे जाके बाद में भी देख सकते हैं. ऑल्सो हम लाइव स्ट्रीम करते हैं फेसबुक के ऊपर भी एज वेल एज लिंक्डइन. सो यू नो इट्स योर चॉइस, आप जहाँ पे जाके देख सकते हो बाद में भी. आज मैं यू नो टुडे इज़ लाइक अ वुमेन ओनली पैनल. सो सुपर डिलाइटेड. एक तो हमारी वापस गेस्ट आ रही हैं केट एडवर्ड्स, जो कि एग्जीक्यूटिव डायरेक्टर हैं ग्लोबल गेम जैम यूएसए की, और उनके साथ वी आर जॉइंड बाय टाबिया, who's the founder of Stardust, and she's coming from a country where I lived for 6 years. So, मैं Switzerland में रहती थी 6 साल, so I'm extremely excited. She's coming in from Zurich, though I used to live in Geneva. And she's also a game developer. She's also a Women in Games ambassador, right? So, you know, we're going to have this fantastic conversation about modern approach to indie game development. जो लोग जानते हैं कि indie games, you know, they're we're going to be describe, जो लोग नहीं जानते, बल्कि जो लोग नहीं जानते उनके लिए हम describe भी करेंगे कि what is the definition, and then obviously what is the career path that you may need to follow and so on. So just the introduction, मैंने थोड़ी सी कोशिश की कि उर्दू के अंदर introduction कर दें because बहुत सारे हमारे followers you know ज़ाहिर है पाकिस्तान से हैं, and of course क्योंकि हमारे पास international speakers हैं, so the rest of it is going to be in English. All right, so without much ado, let me you know add Kate Edwards to the live stream and Tabia as well. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, we can't hear Kate.
Oh.
I can hear her though.
Are you on mute?
No.
Okay. What is it, just me?
Maybe it's just you.
Yeah, it's working for me.
Yeah, I can hear Tabia as well. So.
Oh, okay, it was just me. Okay, accidentally.
Okay.
I had silenced it out. All right. So, ladies, would you like to introduce yourselves a little bit?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Tabea. I'm the founder of Stardust. We're a small indie studio based in Zurich. I also am a Women in Games ambassador, and I work at the university here in Switzerland, where we do games for elderly people for nursing home residents. So I'm mostly focusing on meaningful and wholesome games for target audiences that are, well, you know, not the typical gamer, basically. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Tabia. And obviously, you're running a game studio as well, so we want to learn more as we go through different questions. Kate, over to you. Would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yes. So, hi. I'm Kate. I'm the executive director of the Global Game Jam organization, which is the world's largest game creation event that happens every January. I'm also a geographer who's been doing culturalization work in the game industry for about over 27 years now. Worked on a lot of game titles you're probably familiar with, like Halo and Call of Duty and Age of Empires and lots of other stuff. I also used to run the International Game Developers Association for 5 years. And so I'm also involved in a lot of advocacy work in the industry to basically try and make the industry a better place for all of us. And yeah, so that's basically my background.
No, this is fantastic. I think I kind of want your autographs right now, or should we wait until the end of the show? No, so absolutely. So I think this is really exciting. And especially I'm always delighted when I host, you know, the super women of different industries. This is an area which is up and coming in Pakistan, but we still have very few women who are actually leading their own game studios. So, you know, Tabia, later on, I would like you to reflect a little bit on your journey and tell us how you know, how it all came about. So if you can elaborate that, right? So what happened? How did you land in this area? Was it something that you always knew you wanted to do? So go ahead.
So yeah, I know I didn't always want to do that, actually. I wanted to become my father's successor. He has a company selling sewing machines. So a completely different field. Yeah, and then when I was a teenager, I was doing an apprenticeship as a print production professional. So I'm coming more from the print design, graphic design area. And yeah, I finished the apprenticeship, and I was like, well, I don't feel like I want to do that my whole life. So I started studying game design, and well, one thing led to another, and that's how I ended up in the game industry. And founding the own company basically was, I didn't want to, basically. We had a project, and yeah, it got bigger and bigger, and there were more people on board. We got some cultural funding, and at some point it was just basically too much to do it through my personal accounts, and that's when we founded Stardust. So it wasn't like a long, a plan that I had at some point, and then I worked towards that step by step. It basically just happened, and I'm very happy it did.
So I have follow-up questions, but let me ask Kate. So Kate, you've had a very different academic background, right? So from studying
Yes.
geography and then working in this, how did this happen?
Well, I've always been interested. I mean, I've always been a geek. I've always loved video games. I'm old enough where my first video game was Pong, way back in the early 70s. So I've always been a fan of video games. But I never really aspired to work on games. I've always been a game player. But I've always had a creative background. My original aspiration was to be a conceptual artist for Lucasfilm, because I wanted to work on a Star Wars movie really, really bad. But I didn't go that route. I actually went into geography and cartography, map making, because I could still use my artistic skills with cartography. And that basically, I went down this other path. I was exploring using AR and VR for cartography way back in the early 90s. And then eventually I got pulled into Microsoft to work on their encyclopedia, which was called Encarta, way back in the early 90s. And that's how I started working at Microsoft. And when I was in the company, I basically found that my skills as a geographer could help them in all kinds of ways. So I created an internal team at the company called Geopolitical Strategy. And from there, I was basically helping them avoid political and cultural issues in different products, and that included all the video games. So that's how I started working on games. Is my job doing this culturalization work drew me into the game side. And once I started working on games, I knew that like this is it. This is like the best possible job for me, was doing this work on video games. And ever since then, I've been doing it on primarily video games. And when I created my own company in 2005 to do consulting, usually about 75% of my work is always on video games. There's always another segment that's not game related, but yeah, it's been great. So basically I created my own job, just kind of made something up.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating, right? And both of you have had such different journeys, but both of you have ended up, and now, we're just entering into the space. From Epiphany's perspective, and look at us, I mean, the virtual world has just brought us together. So I don't know if I should say yay COVID, but at least in this regard,
Oh.
this is the only thing which is like the positive. But Tabia, in your case, right? So when you actually, and the reason why I ask is because a lot of times young people, when they're pursuing new areas which their parents may not understand, and there's a generation gap as well, it's a bit problematic, right? And in your case, you were basically telling your dad, "Hey, Dad, no, I'm not going to be your business partner, and I want to do something." So what happened? Did they react positively? Were they supportive?
Not at first. We always had fights in the family because I like to play games all my life, basically. Well, I have to say it was my dad's fault because he introduced me to video games. So, but however, they were not always happy about it, especially because my family are very religious Christians, and they had big issues with some of the games I would like to play. Like, for example, they absolutely didn't like Pokemon. So we had big fights on that. And they always wanted me to learn, or work in something useful. And when I told them that I would like to study game design, they weren't super happy, but they still supported me They were very worried until I got a job after my bachelor, because the Swiss game industry is still quite small. It was way smaller back then. There were like in the whole of Switzerland, there were like 2 or 3 job offerings at the point where I finished my bachelor.
Graduated.
Exactly. So when I landed one of these jobs, my parents basically came to term with, or they kind of accepted me pursuing that job. They're still not very interested in it because it's my dad stopped playing video games at some point, and my mom she played like Tetris once. So that's everything.
I used to play Tetris as well. Okay, I was very good.
Me too.
To be honest, no, absolutely. I mean, my sister used to beat me soundly. I've got an older sister. She would always beat me at Mario games, Mario Brothers. And, still we would play. But then, after some time, it's not much fun if you're losing again and again, right? And your sister's like, eh, eh, eh. So my sister was like this irritating brat, right? But anyway, what about you, Kate? So what was happening at that point in time? Because this is even earlier on, right? You're talking about.
Well, yeah, back then, I mean, the thing that was different with me is that back when I was in high school and my early college days, there were no game design programs back then. There was no formal education in game creation at all. And so basically, a lot of people I knew who were interested in games would get their computer science degree in programming, or they would, get an art degree or Master of Fine Arts or something, and then they'd eventually find their way into the game industry, which really wasn't very big back then, and there really wasn't many opportunities. So you just kind of had to make your own path. And I know a lot of people who are, I guess, of my generation, kind of accidentally, just like me, I kind of accidentally walked backwards into the game industry, and then suddenly realized, wow, this is really cool. I really like this. And in terms of my journey, it's like my parents were school teachers. They basically told my older brother and I, you guys do whatever you want as long as it makes you happy. We really don't care, but do something, don't just kind of sit around. So I changed my majors a few times in college because I'm interested in all kinds of things, but geography is really the one that stuck. And what's cool though is that even though my aspiration was to work on Star Wars on a film, many years later, with BioWare being one of my clients, I worked on Star Wars: The Old Republic video game for 4 years. So I did get to work on something Star Wars. It was just in a completely different capacity, but that was a real joy to be able to actually finally, as they say in Star Wars, the circle is now complete. So I was able to actually to do that. And, so I know especially even today, though, for people who have skills like mine, which are often non-traditional skills in the game industry, because I know people who are psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists. I know astronomers who work in the game industry. I know ethnomusicologists who work in the game industry. And all of these people, because you're not in the core creative sector necessarily, you're not a producer, writer, artist, programmer, whatever, you kind of have to be very creative about how you find your job in the industry. But it is possible because, like I said, I know tons of people who are able to do it. You just have to be really imaginative about how you're going to do it.
So as a follow-on to that, right? So now obviously there are different opportunities for people to learn as well and so on. So what would you advise, both of you ladies, right? So if somebody wanted to explore gaming as a career and they actually wanted to go into game development, what should they be doing? And if they're not, hardcore programmers and they can't develop games like that, so if they may be writers or they're coming in from different industries, what would be a natural career path for them?
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in on that one, because especially when I ran the International Game Developers Association, I would get asked this question almost every day about, like, I love games. I want to work in the game industry. And usually what I tell people is that, first of all, you need to figure out what about games do you love, and what about making them do you think you would enjoy? Because a lot of people, they think that just because they play games a lot, they think that they're going to enjoy making games, but that's not always the case. So but my encouragement to them is to do things like the Global Game Jam, which happens, like I said, every year in January, or not just the Global Game Jam, but there's all kinds of game jams that tend to happen throughout the year. And that's a great opportunity especially for somebody new, to jump in and just kind of try it and see if you enjoy it. And a game jam is basically a very intense period where you're trying to create a game with a small group of other people, and it's an indie game. It's a small, just a kind of a prototype project, but that gives you a chance to test whether you're good at writing, or maybe you're good at audio, maybe you're good at a good programmer, maybe you're a great artist. But you have to explore all those different things to kind of see what is your real skill, and it's not only what do you do well, but also what do you really enjoy. And so you need to experiment with that. And I think doing game jams and getting involved in some indie projects is a fantastic way to do that.
I think that's a brilliant idea. And that way you've actually cracked time, right? You've actually hacked time or cracked time, whatever you want to say, because you've figured out what is it that ticks. And even if you don't understand in the first go ahead and participate in a few more jams. I think that's really sound advice. What about you, Tabia? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think working on indie projects, I mean, of course, like first find out, is it something you actually like to do? And if you think like, yes, I want to do that, I think indie projects are perfect to do that, because especially indies that are just starting out with their company, or, are not overly funded, they are always happy to work with people that also are looking for more experience. So working with these projects, do maybe a small job at first and find out if that's working for you. That's a great opportunity, because I feel like oftentimes in these very early projects, bonds are formed that will last for years and years. At least in my case, it was like that. So it's great to step by step, go basically like going into the water first, just your toes, and then a little bit more. And if you like it, you at some point you will be in it, basically.
Okay, so let's now we've been saying indie games and we've been throwing the term around a few times already, right? So let's describe it. How would you, define indie games for our audience?
Well, I know that the term indie game has been something of an industry debate, or at least it used to be. I don't know if it's as debated now as it used to be, but because it depends on how you define what independent really means. I mean, for some people, it means you're financially independent, meaning you're funding the effort yourself, which I think for most indies is true. Or it means that you're working on a game that is completely owned by you. So it's your intellectual property. No publisher owns it or has a stake in it. So it's all completely yours. So it kind of depends. I mean, but I think for the most part, it's a project that you started, you meaning could be you and a small team of people. It's your idea. You are using it with what we call sweat equity, which is basically you're putting in your best effort in addition to probably another job that you do during the day or something to pay your bills. But basically you're putting this effort out there, and you're not being funded by any external source. And typically, to me, that's what indie means. It's your own idea, and you're the one making it come into existence.
Okay, Tabia, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, you sent us this question beforehand, and I was like, "Oof, this is a really tough one, actually."
I figured, right? But that's something which keeps coming up again and again, right? And people do ask.
It also changes a lot. I feel like when I started out, like, I don't know, 10 or 5 years ago, the answer was like, yes, it's games that are independent and that don't have a publisher behind it, that don't have investors behind it, that, like Kate said, own the IP. But I feel like today it's completely different. We do have indie publishers, which basically, would like defeat the purpose. It's like a paradox. I feel, and I was thinking about it, and I feel like it sort of became like the other. in terms of it's not AAA. It became
Yeah.
everything that's not AAA. So if AAA is huge teams, indie is small teams. If AAA is huge budgets, then indie is like small
Mhm.
budgets. If AAA is like, oh, they're gonna grab our money, which I don't think, but that's a lot of the narrative you're reading on the internet. Then indie is like this personal developer
Yeah.
where you speak with the developers that that put a lot of their love and life into these games. So it kind of became like just the opposite of AAA in a way, and not necessarily the whole funding aspect or IP aspect. I feel like to the community is not as important anymore to the label indie.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, especially because I think on the one level, there's kind of the technical definition, like, are you self-funded or whatever? But I think more importantly, I think what the point you're bringing up is that it's a culture too. It's a way of thinking. And I think a lot of ways that a lot of the folks that I know in the indie space they expressly define themselves by being counterculture, meaning they are not exactly like you said. We are not AAA. We are not the big people, but it's funny because even some large companies out there, I mean, technically, for example, like Blizzard, before Blizzard was acquired by Activision, Blizzard was technically an indie company.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, they made this little startup game called Warcraft, and then it grew, and then they created StarCraft, and then they created World of Warcraft. And all the way up to that point, they were completely independent, self-funded, all of that stuff. And then they got, partnered with Activision. But nobody, if you ask people, was Blizzard an indie company? Most people today, I think, would say no, they're not indie at all, but they were technically. They just got really big.
Yeah. And that's a great success story also in a way, right? That you can be self-financed and you can actually grow over time. You don't always have to stay small. You may start it off like a passion project, but then sooner or later it could pick up. So this brings me to my next question, right? So how has indie game development actually grown over the years?
Well, I mean, the answer I would give to that, I mean, I think we kind of implicitly or anecdotally know that it's grown tremendously. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that the tools to create games have become democratized in a way that we have not seen in any time since. I mean, over the past 10 years or so, where we've seen like the free version of Unity and Unreal and other tools make themselves available to students and others, basically anyone who wants to make a game. And also the amount of education now that you can find on YouTube and other sources, that's all out there for free. I have met, especially when there's no pandemic happening, I do a lot of travel, and especially to emerging markets. And I have met so many people who are self-taught, and they do amazing work, remarkable work, just because they watch YouTube and they, downloaded a free version. And I think that democratization is really what has enabled indie games to just explode over the last many years.
And so I know that I'm speaking to advocates of indie games, right? So this is an easy question after that. But why do you think it's important to promote indie games?
I think it's important for the very reason Kate just mentioned, that it kind of it's not just the big players anymore, not just a few select countries that have a big game industry that can make games and are defining what games are and what they're not. Now it's so much more diverse. Everybody can make games, and I think it's not only for these all these different game communities around the world. It's great. It's also that basically it changes what games are, because in these kind of they are way smaller. They are a lower budget, so they can do more risk. They can explore new target audiences, new topics. Like one of my favorite examples at the moment is the wholesome game community, where they had this Wholesome Direct in May, which was a huge success, and nobody heard of the term wholesome games before, basically. So, and I feel like the success also shows that this is a viable market that probably will grow and will get accepted over the years, and there will also be more AAA wholesome games in the future, I think. So I think indie is this wonderful pool where we can explore things, we can prove that things work, that there are more target audiences, and that eventually then can grow into the bigger projects. So I that's one thing I really love, and why I think we should support indies too.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that I totally agree. I mean, the thing I love about indie games and what I see coming out of that space is that, in my opinion, especially having the fact that most of the games I've worked on over my career are all big AAA games. And I love the fact that when I look at indie games, what I see there is innovation. I mean, that to me is where the industry is really evolving. It's not with AAA. The AAA games are technically, they're really advanced. And I know that the games coming out for the next generation consoles are going to be amazing to look at. But I'm talking about narrative. I'm talking about game design. I'm talking about, are we really pushing the boundary on what a game is? And when I see the next version of Halo or Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto or whatever it's going to be, those are going to be amazing games to play from a technical standpoint. They're going to look beautiful and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure the narratives are going to be good. But is it different? Is it really that different from what we've seen in every version before that? And the answer is no. But in the same way, I mean, we see that in film all the time. It's like the structure. If you look, for example, at a Marvel movie, and I love the MCU, so don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Marvel geek, but the films are not really that much different. Yeah, you've got different characters and stuff, but for the most part, the narrative structure is pretty much the same. And but in indie games, what I love is that we're seeing people experiment with gameplay and game design unlike we've seen anywhere else. And I know that the large publishers like, Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony, they understand this because that's why they are allowing indie games to be published on their consoles and on their platforms, because they realize that I think they openly understand that is where the real innovation is happening today.
So my next question is actually going to be, how do you promote? How would you say could be some strategies to promote indie games? Because now, and I'm talking also from the Pakistani perspective, because obviously it is an emerging economy, and a lot of young game developers, they may not have a lot of funds, and also investment in the game industry is limited at present. It is limited, right? So how would you say that, what could we do? Perhaps as Epiphany, or just generally, what could the ecosystem do to support game developers and to promote it, so it's kind of like it gets that impetus and we fast track it?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things that could happen here. I mean, it's I think, for one thing I will say, if you're a developer in Pakistan or in another what you consider to be emerging market, one thing I will say that will be both discouraging and encouraging. The discouraging part is that marketing an indie game is really tough because there are so many games out there. And I don't just mean AAA. I mean, you look on Steam, for example, there are thousands and thousands of games on Steam that you have to compete with. And so that's the discouraging part. The encouraging part is that any developer in the world, any indie developer in the world is in the exact same position you are. And it doesn't matter where you're based. It doesn't matter if you're in the US or, Brazil or Pakistan or wherever. You all face the same challenge where you have this idea you came up with, you've got your game, and now how does it get exposure and how does it find an audience? And I think what I've seen some of the more successful indie games do is that while you're in development, you are already developing the community around your game. And community today is absolutely critical to the success of a game, whether it's a huge AAA or whether it's an indie game. And so what I mean by that is that you should already be play testing your game with people, even in your local city or community, wherever they are. You should already be trying to get people to play it. You can't be embarrassed about it and say, well, it's not done yet. It's like, well, the only way it's really going to be done and it's going to be everything you want it to be, is that you need to get it play tested. You need people to give you feedback, and you need to take that feedback, and think about it critically. Obviously, it needs to be constructive feedback. If it's not, then I would just ignore it. But if it's just criticism,
filter through. Absolutely. So look in the
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, but that's basically my point. I think community is basically one of the main gateways to marketing and exposure.
And I would just like to add to that, right? So in a way, it is so similar to entrepreneurship, because you're kind of just waiting for the perfect one, and you're just like, no, but I can't take it. And actually, that's how business is done. That's how you're supposed to do it. So you're supposed to find your early adopters and keep sending version 1 and then 2 and then 3. And then before you know it, you've got the final version, which everybody wants to buy or they're so hooked to. And they're just kind of like, where? I don't care. I just want the old version. Just give it to me now, right? So it could happen. So we've got a comment coming in from somebody on LinkedIn. And they're saying that, AAA games play it safe. Indie games are actually the ones taking risks and evolving the industry, right? So, and this gives me a lot of hope, because I come across these really, really talented young people, right? And I mean, when I look at young people, I think, I don't know what we were doing when we were their age, right? It's like there's so much exposure, there's so much, in a way, they're doing so much more that we were unable to do. Yeah, as you can hear, my daughter, wants to take all the credit. She's just 10 years old, but okay. Anyway, okay, so Tabia, tell us more about your game, right? So tell us about Ava, and what is that all about?
Ava is an interactive tarot card game, and it actually has a pretty special backstory, because before I started with Ava, I was working in the industry for several years, and I realized that being a woman in the industry, and I think a lot of other women have the similar experience, are meeting some, I guess, problems, are they're not getting taken seriously. One of my favorite stories is always one of my first Gamescoms, where I was at the booth with a game where I was the lead programmer, and then there was this guy who came by and was like, "Hey, I would like to talk to the developers." And I was like, "Yeah, I was the lead programmer." And then he was like, "But somebody who worked on the game." And I was like, "Yes, I was programming it. I was coding it. So I worked on the game." And he was like, "No, but somebody who was actually working on the game." I was like, and it's all these kind of experiences that kind of make you feel, why am I not credible? Is it why is it because I'm just young or not good enough? And eventually you find out, it's probably because I'm a woman. And so when I left the two companies I worked for before I started my own, I wanted to make a game about these experiences, and basically make a game about how it feels to be judged or put into a certain, or like how people feel what you can do and what you can't, based on your physical appearance. And I feel like it's not just being a woman, it can also be very different things. So that's how Ava was created. And when I started to talk to other people, I realized that so many are going through the same things, and I realized how talking about it and sharing these experiences, it doesn't make it undone, or it's not perfect, but to me it was it really helped me, and that's also why I wanted to make a game about it. So we started to create this interactive fairy tale, basically, because we thought that a fairy tale is a really good way to talk metaphorically about these topics, because we don't want to, it's still a game, it's supposed to be fun, and we don't want to be like, oh, being a woman in the game industry is so depressing. We wanted the players to enjoy it, so we went with this fairy tale, and we started to create these amazing tarot cards where you always read a part of the story, and then you look at the card, the tarot card, which is mirroring what's happening in the story. And then we also started to work with a lot of different artists from around the world, because we didn't wanted to just, talk about the topic. We also wanted to show what we want to achieve. So we searched illustrators from around the world. Currently, we are like at 25 to 30 different illustrators from almost every continent and so many countries and so many different backgrounds. And it's amazing, because we want to show like, hey, look, there are these super talented people, and they're not all just middle-aged, white, cis, heterosexual men. There are so many different amazing people there, and we want to do this. So yeah, that's basically the story of the game.
No, I mean, that's fantastic, by the way. So go on. Yes, we're listening.
Yeah, we just released the second chapter of the game today.
Oh, awesome! Congratulations!
Thank you. We quickly joined you for that for the panel, and I will go back to coordinating Ava later. So yeah, we're super happy with the game. We have an amazing community. We get amazing feedback of people like, hey, yes, this is exactly the kind of game we want to see, and we want to see more of it. So we're so happy that we basically can, live this vision of do something innovative, changing what games are and who plays games and who creates games. That to be a part of that movement, basically.
No, I think that's fantastic. Awesome. And what I'm going to say to you is, please, in comments, that there are comments, I'm sure you can see them. So type in and send us, the details of the game. So maybe there are other people just as excited as me who want to try. I'm terrible, but I will definitely try playing this game. And the other piece that I kind of want to reflect on, right, because this is something which comes up again and again. It's not just the gaming industry. It's a lot of the industries, right? So even in social entrepreneurship, I still remember I was sitting at this meeting, and this gentleman kept asking me, okay, so who's the real, because my title used to say co-founder. So he kept asking me, who's the real co-founder? Who's the real co-founder? And I'm just like, I'm the real co-founder. That's why it says co-founder. No, but who's the other guy? Who's the other person? And I was like, oh, if you're asking, yes, there is a guy in the company. Does that make you happy? Right? Does that satisfy you? So he's like, okay. So he's the real co-founder. And I was like, I left my job first. Doesn't that make me the real co-founder? Hello. So, it's until this day, I'm just so irritated when I see this person, and I keep seeing him, right? So on and off in different events, I see him. But this is something which is very real. And especially when it comes to technology, tech kind of, or different industries, I would say, that's where you face it even more, right? And, I mean, I'm sure, Kate, you've had your own share of pushing that agenda through as well at IGDA. So, any anecdotes from there, and then we'll jump back to indie game.
Oh, I have a lot of anecdotes, especially because I was running the IGDA during the time of Gamergate. And so being a woman in a leadership role in the game industry during that time made me a prime target of these people. And so I endured at least, over 2 years of death threats and harassment and negative comments and all kinds of, very, negative behavior every single day. On Twitter, on other social media, because basically I was, again, I'm a visible woman in the industry, and I was trying to promote diversity and inclusion and promote game development in all its different forms, including indie development, and of course also given my culturalization background, which many saw as being politically correct, and so I'm pushing an agenda, and so that was difficult, and it's just like, if I had been a male doing that exact same work, would I have gotten that same level of vitriol and backlash? And I think no, absolutely not. I mean, I would have probably gotten some, but not to the degree that I got. I mean, death threats, come on. I mean, seriously. But that's the internet we deal with today, and it's just, I can joke about it now, but at the time it was not a joke. I mean, it was really intense. That was about 5 years ago, and it was it's something I would not wish on my own worst enemy, to have to go through something like that. So
look, I'm going to take a quick second to ask you, right? Because we do see, and especially because of COVID times, everybody is online, and we do note that online harassment has gone up. what would be some strategies? It may be that you were unable to handle it, or you think you could have handled it better. So is there something that you could reflect on and share for the rest of the audience on how they can handle this better?
Well, I think there's a few things. First of all, make sure you have a good support network around you, whether it's family or friends or whoever, but you need to have that support network to help you, because it is emotionally draining. It really is. I mean, it will wear you down. And actually your detractors and the people who are criticizing you or making destructive comments online, that is their goal. They want you to break down. They want to see your face when you with the sad and downtrodden look, but don't let them have it. It's just like, don't give them that victory. I mean, and you also have to realize that these are people who don't know who you are. They don't really know anything about you other than what they may have found in their internet searches. And so it's like, they're just judging you because that's what they're there to do. There's a lot of people online, much like the Joker in the movie The Dark Knight. They're just agents of chaos. They just want to see the world burn, and they don't really care who's burning. They get their entertainment and they get their kicks from it. And so a lot of times when we hear stuff online, we get a response on Twitter that it's not constructive or positive. It's remember that a lot of the people who are giving those comments, basically, they don't really care about you. They don't care anything about you. They're just there to be disruptive. And so if people are actually saying something that's useful and constructive, then listen to them. Maybe they're giving you feedback about your game, or maybe you wrote something or wrote an article. If it's constructive, listen to them. But if it's not, ignore it. I just ignore it. And I know it's difficult, but one of the things I learned during Gamergate is that once you have 100 arrows in your back, you don't notice the rest. And I know that's a horrible analogy, but it's true. Once you get that kind of level of comments, you tend to focus on only the things that are useful and positive, and everything else, just ignore it. It serves no purpose.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. That was. I think that's really, really useful. That's usually the modus operandi, that you just ignore it. But at some point, I think it's also important, and these collective kind of platforms really enable that, where people need to come together and really start talking to male allies to tell them, hey, fix the rest of your gender. Come on, please teach them how they need to behave, right? You be the champions, right? You talk to them, because a lot of times what happens is they don't understand because they haven't faced it, right? So because they haven't faced it, there's that lack of understanding, which is not the fault of male allies, but I think it's important for us to be able to share it again and again, right? If it's falling on deaf ears, okay, you explain it again, right? So
it's like, as the saying goes, at least as we say here in the West, the evil triumphs when good people do nothing. And so a lot of the harassment I see online is simply because people who feel otherwise, people who agree with you, they don't speak up. They don't come to your defense because they're afraid of also being called out. And it's just unfortunate, because if more people actually stood up with you, especially men who disagree with sexism and disagree with being exclusionary, if they would just speak up more and defend the women and defend other people who have a marginalized voice, it would be a lot different. It'd be a much better.
In a way, it would be stronger, right? It's very, very strong when it's the other gender supporting us at the end.
Yeah.
So let's move on, okay? Because we're short on time, but this was really important. So I'm glad we made that diversion here, and it was important because Ava has come about because of everything that Tabia has faced. So now, so leading on from that, right? What other things can indie games teach us? So whoever wants to go first.
Everything, basically. I mean, again, coming back to the whole indie games are innovative, and they can talk about the topics that are important to the people behind these games. I feel like it's amazing what they can tell you and teach you, because I always felt like games are one of the best mediums to basically, get into somebody else's shoes. Not only being the super checked, super strong, super intelligent, super fighter, but also experiencing everything. And thus I feel like indie games can teach us everything. They can teach us from the smallest story from everywhere in the world and to big hero stories. And that's what I think is also a big strength of indie games. They don't have to be long. It can be just a 30-minute experience, and you have like this tiny glimpse into this person's lives, or what is important to that developer. So yeah, it's everything.
Yeah, I mean, I would just to add to that, because I completely agree. I mean, the way that I view games in general is that games are an empathy engine. Games are unlike any other form of entertainment or any other medium we have. Games are the best poised to teach empathy about other people's walks of life and other people's experiences. And so I think that's been one of the things I love about seeing indie games, especially because the tools have become so democratized. We're seeing a chance for underrepresented voices to tell their stories from all around the world, from different cultural perspectives, gender perspectives, whatever it might be. And that's been super exciting to me. It's like when I was in Iran a couple of years ago for the Tehran Game Conference, and to see that, despite all the economic and political issues around Iran right now in the West, there is a tremendous number of game developers in Iran who are so talented, and they're leveraging their own history and their own culture to make some really amazing games. And it's really sad to me that some of these games just will not get out because of the economic situation. But it's just one example of where I've seen indie developers basically they're telling the stories that they want to tell, not telling the stories that make money. And I think that's what's important. And of course, the important thing too is that a lot of these stories do make money because they're introducing new content and new designs to a community that's really hungry for something different.
Absolutely. I mean, one of my favorite examples is, fairy tales and folklore from different places, because we're so used to the same old fairy tales. And with Disney, the whole, fairy tales are so Western and Grimm, like the Brother Grimm centered. And I love to explore and even if it's not that topic, even if it's something like Moana, it's still created by an American, US company, right? And I love all these small little games from indie developers from around the world, where they tell their fairy tales and their folklore stories, because it's just so enriching to read all these different or experience all these different stories. So that's
Okay, so I kind of want to ask you guys, what are your favorite games?
Oh, that's so hard.
And that's why I shared the question beforehand, okay? Because I figured this is a hard one.
Yeah, well, I know I would say, I mean, it's hard because there's a lot of games I've worked on that I really like. I mean, like I worked on all the original Halo games, and even though it's like your typical first-person shooter, I like the lore of that universe. I think it's a cool backstory, and so I still love playing Halo games. I love Assassin's Creed games because it's that combination of real-world history and culture with this fictional narrative. But then there's so many amazing indie games I've seen out there. I mean, one of my favorite games I've played was That Dragon Cancer, which is a very personal story about a couple who basically tells the story of losing their son to cancer, and the game was basically their cathartic release of how they dealt with that. I mean, to Tabea's point is that there's games like that those are the ones that stick with me the longest. They may not be necessarily fun to play because the topics can be really challenging to work through, but those are the ones that I really remember more than anything else. And so, but it's hard. It's hard to pick favorites because there's too many good ones out there.
Okay, Tabia, are you going to avoid the question? Are you going to share some names?
Well, I think I'm very there are two versions of me. There's Tabea, who loves to play competitive multiplayer games, and I'm sinking so many hours into these. Like I played Dota 2 for 1,000 hours. I played Overwatch for the same amount of time. So yeah, these amazing big games where you feel like, oh wow, there's so much to explore. I can really work on my skills. I can play together with my friends or with other people. I really like those. And then on the other hand, I love these small experiences that, you know, just lets me relax for 30 minutes. Yeah, totally dive into another world, another story. So yeah, it's completely different, but I feel like both of these genres are really, really important to me. And I also couldn't make any favorites because I love to play new games, and it basically changes every month. Currently, I'm playing a lot of Ooblets, and I love it. But if you ask me in 2 weeks, it's probably going to be a different answer.
So I did want to ask you both. So for people who are trying to pursue a career in indie game development, and perhaps even generally in game development, what would be your advice?
One of the key things I would advise is that if you really want to work in games, or if you're already trying to go in that direction, one thing that's really important is that you should be making games already. Just like we've already said, the tools are out there and they're free, and you could just go download them and start making stuff. And you don't just have to use Unity or Unreal. There's all kinds of other stuff like Twine and Game Maker and other programs out there, but find something that allow you to have that form of creative expression and then just start doing it. Because it's one of the things we see in a lot of other creative mediums. Like if you meet somebody who wants to make films, or you meet someone who wants to be a writer or a painter, those people tend to already do that stuff. And what I mean by that, like for an aspiring writer, that writer tends to be writing a lot. They probably have 5 different stories they have in their head, and maybe they've got 2 or 3 of them that are in different forms of creation. But the point is that they're actually trying to do that work. And it's no different with game creation, because these are skills that you have to develop, and you have to improve them. And the only way you can do that is by actually doing the work. It's just like I met a 17-year-old a few years ago, and at the time I met her, she was self-taught. She looked at YouTube, she downloaded Unity and all that. She had already made 40 games by the age 17, and she put 5 of them up on the iOS store, not for pay, just for free, because she wanted to see if people like her work. She had over 1 million players across 5 different games,
Wow.
And it was just her experimenting. She was just trying to kind of find her path. And when I met her, she said to me, and she was super shy at the time, she said, "I just want to be a game developer someday." And I said, "You already are, you just want to get better at it, just like everybody else, even people who have been working in games for 10 years still want to get better at it." And so the point is that you have to take that step and actually start doing it. If you don't just talk about it, don't dream about it, you actually have to do it.
Yeah, so I'm just bringing up a couple of comments, okay, because we're at the end of the program anyway. So Chris had said, bring the maximum value to your early adopters. They will evangelize your product ecosystem and create a network effect to reach many others. So I think that was really, really sound advice, that create your community, start playing, start getting feedback, improve upon it. Be like the 17-year-old, by the way. So how old is she now, Kate? And would you be able to put us in touch? Because we'd love to talk to her.
Yeah, I could actually. She and I actually both served together on the board of a group called the Girls STEAM Institute. And yeah, she went to MIT. She got her degree in game design. Wow. She started her own company. Yeah, she's pretty amazing. Okay,
awesome. Well, would love to hear her story and map that out. And then somebody else is saying this, that Twine is fantastic for writers. Good call, Kate. Okay, over to you, Tabia. What do you think people need to do?
Many different things. I mean, I think you should be passionate about what you're doing, because game development is such a big task. It will take you a lot of time to either create many small games or one big game. So yeah, like we said really early on, find out what you love about game development and be passionate about it. I would also say one of the most important things is to be patient, because it's not, there's so much to learn, and like Kate said, there are so many people who have been in the industry for so many years, and yeah, be patient with yourself. Just keep going. You will get better. You will learn more, and don't have the expectation, or don't pressure yourself that you have to be this perfect game developer in your first year. Basically, be patient. It will work out, or at least that's my personal view. And I think also go at your own pace. Don't compare to others that maybe are more successful, less successful. Just do it in your own pace, because it's not a sprint; it's a marathon, and you have to take care of yourself if you want to keep doing it. So yeah, that's basically it. Also, of course, talk to people, learn from other people, meet friends, make new friends. That's also important and very much a big part of the fun of creating games.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that as well. I think networking is critical. You have to be part of a community, and because you learn from other people. So don't hesitate to try and find a mentor. You could even look on LinkedIn to find people who do work that you want to do, and just reach out to people. And you're not asking them for a job. You're just asking them, for advice. If you have something to show them and say, hey, can you give me feedback on this? Having a mentor, being part of a community to get that kind of feedback is so helpful. And you learn so much from talking to other people. So, I mean, I would not hesitate, to do that. And especially, I just wanted to say one quick thing, and to Tabia's point about comparing yourself. The American writer Mark Twain, he once said that comparison is the death of joy. So think about that. Comparison will kill you. So don't worry about what other people are doing around you. Just focus on trying to do your best. And if somebody is better than you, or you see them, they're a better artist or programmer or something, then guess what? You may have just found a good mentor for yourself. So go ask them.
I think that's, you ladies are extremely, extremely smart and wise, right? So 3 years back, quick anecdote, 3 years back when I started, and there were, of course, people who were doing what I was trying to do much, much better. And also they were doing it for a lot longer, right? So I found myself always looking over and looking over behind, kind of like, you've got like, you're just looking behind yourself. Oh my God, they're catching up, right? And then I stopped because it's just really, really tiring. And at the end of the day, everybody has their own careers and career paths and journeys. And when they were setting up their own business, maybe you were doing something else. Or when somebody was becoming a game developer, perhaps you were exploring something else. And somewhere along the line, the connections will meet, the dots will meet, right?
Yes,
and now
absolutely.
that I am also older and wiser, I can look back and actually do the dot connection, right? So I think that's really important as well. And another thing which I'd like to add is always look back at where you were and how far you've come, because that gives you a lot of strength, right? Patience, perseverance, networking, mentorship. I think all of those are really important advice, pieces of advice that you guys have given. So thank you very much, ladies. I am delighted that you guys are here.
Thank
and
you.
that you offered such a lot of. It was an interesting conversation, and we learned a lot. We didn't ask the difficult question, Kate. By the way, we skipped it. What's the contribution of indie games towards, the overall
value? Yeah, it's hard to estimate. I mean, I read a statistic that they say that there's over $1 billion worth of indie games on Steam, which is still a small fraction of the total number in terms of the revenue of the global industry, but it's hard to estimate because nobody tracks it very closely.
Okay. So, well, we did ask you the final question as well. All right, then. So thank you, both of you, Tabia and Kate, and have a lovely day. And also, we know that Switzerland is celebrating its anniversary very soon this weekend. So enjoy the national holiday that's coming up. And we'll see you guys hopefully very soon.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, so thank you very much once again to our two fantastic guests that we had for today's session, which was a modern approach to indie game development. I personally learned a lot. I hope you guys learned a lot as well. Next week, we're going to be back on Wednesday with Smashing It. And this time around, we've got this fantastic fashion blogger called Sadaf Zarar. She has been running it since the past few years. It's called City Says, so you probably know that know her by that name. So looking forward to next week, and thank you very much for listening in. Enjoy and happy Eid.